Have you heard the saying, trust takes years to build, seconds to break, and forever to repair? Well, I think this goes to the heart of building and maintaining trust in teams, and in particular the role you have to play as the boss. Before we get to the good stuff though, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you can get a new video from me every Friday. And my videos are very much aimed at helping you thrive and grow your confidence in handling anything your workplace can throw at you. I'm Hayley Lewis, I'm a business psychologist, and I've helped thousands of managers and leaders over the years grow their confidence, motivate their teams, and kind of go on to thrive and go on to even better levels of performance in whatever they're doing. In today's video, I'm going to help you kind of understand a bit more about what it means to build trust in teams, and then the things that you can do to kind of maintain that. Okay, so you manage a team, say, and so you might be a boss in an organisation, so you might be in a corporate role, you might have quite a big team, or you might have set up your own business, and you might have quite a small team, so you might have kind of 2 or 3 people. Doesn't matter. It might be that you're feeling kind of the levels of trust aren't quite where you want them to be. It might be that trust is broken between kind of your team members. It might even be your team members don't quite trust you. And because trust levels aren't quite where they need to be, some vicious circles have kind of started. So it might mean that people aren't communicating fully, not sharing information. Maybe when things go wrong, you're finding out too late. This is only serving to kind of make you and your colleagues trust each other a little less, and then the cycle starts again. People kind of keep stuff to themselves and so on and so forth. And look, it's all just feeling a little bit blur. Ugh. And you know, when we're spending most of our time at work, you know, particularly if you're working for a big organisation, more often than not we're spending more time with our work colleagues than we are with our friends and family. That's a long time to kind of be in a really dire situation. So I'm just going to talk you through kind of what the research tells us, and then I'm going to give you some tips about what you might do to kind of build and then kind of maintain those levels of trust. So in 2017, there were a group of researchers led by a woman called Anna Maria Costa, and they looked at over 125 different studies of teams, which kind of involved thousands of teams. And they found a number of factors build and maintain trust. So they looked at stuff like personality, they looked at stuff like how the teams were kind of structured, they even looked at the organisations that teams sat as part of. And you know, unsurprisingly, one of the biggest factors that impacts trust in teams is the leader of that team. So what they found was that the more high quality the relationship was between the leader and their team, the higher the levels of trust. And the thing that kind of helped create that high quality relationship was where the leader was accessible to their team, that they were open, so they shared stuff about themselves so their team members could get to know them, and they were emotionally accessible, and in particular were compassionate. So here are my 5 tips that should help you kind of build and, more importantly, keep trust going in your team. So it really starts with how you're selecting people in to your team. And again, it doesn't matter if you have a big team or if you're a start-up and you're kind of you've got a couple of people and you're looking for one more. It all starts with how you're kind of bringing people in. Don't just think about selection in terms of the job description. This is a trap that a lot of bosses fall into. You've got to think about how the wider team is. So what kind of personalities are already in place. Think about the makeup in terms of behaviours and dynamic, and how well would the person be likely to complement what's already in place. The second tip is around creating objectives that aren't just for each individual separately. So some of the best teams that I've worked with, the bosses kind of developed objectives that really force people to work together. They're kind of reliant on each other. And this kind of taps back into that research that I talked about, where kind of people being interdependent with each other can actually help facilitate higher levels of trust. So when you're thinking about appraisal time and setting objectives, maybe make one or two of those objectives such that success is dependent on the person working well with somebody else. The third tip I've got is around developing team ground rules and values. So without a doubt, clients have told me this is the most valuable thing they could have done with their teams. So organisational values, again, particularly if you're in a big organisation, can be quite bland. You know, glossy posters on a wall, you might get a mug if you're lucky, but they don't really kind of speak to people. And so developing a set of team specific values can make a real difference, because they're kind of tapping into what's important to each of you that makes up the team, and it's using words that resonate deeply with people. One manager I worked with even went as far as, once her team had developed a set of values, got them blown up, printed onto kind of big posters and dotted around their office, she also made sure to include them as part of team meetings. So they were talking about their team values regularly in terms of how it was impacting their work, were there some that they were doing better at than others, and what they could do to kind of work on those maybe that they were struggling with. And so it became just a natural part of their everyday working lives to kind of regularly think about this stuff and talk about it. There's also something about the relationships you have with other teams. So you might be, or your team might need to work very closely with other teams in your organisation, or they might actually need to work with teams in other organisations. And one of the biggest things that can help is, again, you know, the kind of language you're using. If you're kind of coming maybe back from a meeting with another team and you're frustrated with them, and you kind of come back and you kind of go and maybe say some not very nice things about those teams, that's going to go into your team's kind of consciousness and maybe make them think those other teams aren't worth working with. So there's really something about you kind of watching what you're saying and really thinking about how your team needs to work with other teams, and the things that you can do to facilitate that. This also includes project teams. So this is where I see a lot of organisations fall down, because a project team is temporary. So it might be a month-long project or a 6-month-long project, and more often than not you might pull people from different parts of the organisation. You might even have some kind of temporary workers who come in, and they're kind of left to their own devices. Whereas a couple of teams I've worked with recently took the project teams I've worked with recently took the time to sit down, think about how are we going to work together, who are we, getting to know each other, and again creating their own kind of set of project team values about the difference they wanted to make and working with respect. And the fifth and final tip I've got for you, and I suppose it really builds on the previous tip around your relationships or your team's relationships with other teams, is you role modelling trust in behaviour. So look, if you lead a team, how are you showing them that you trust them? Because I mean, there was a quote from I think it's an ancient Chinese philosopher called Lao Tzu, and he said, "He who does not trust enough will not be trusted." And I think that's pretty true. You can't expect your team to trust you and kind of share stuff about what's going on if you're not sharing stuff about yourself and showing them that you trust them. So it can be as simple as asking for feedback. Again, something in my experience over the years, I still don't see enough bosses proactively do. They kind of wait for a formal system to be in place. Whereas regularly, you know, asking people, what's it like to work with me? You know, how have I been this week? How can I kind of serve you even better and help you do your job? By asking those questions regularly could make a real difference. It can also be about giving people responsibility for maybe a high profile project, as long as you're kind of setting the parameters, but rather than kind of keeping that stuff to yourself, helping your team members to kind of get involved. And so look, I hope that's been helpful for you. And if you're looking to build strong relationships in your team, then why not download one of my free guides? This framework helps you transform your relationships in the workplace. It helps you have even better discussions, and more importantly, will help you build trust with your colleagues. Did you like this video? So if you did, subscribe and also show it some love by giving it a big old thumbs up. Did any of my tips stand out for you? Why not share in the comments box below so that others can learn from you? So thank you very much, and I'll see you next Friday.